Hello and welcome to Crane Talk, a podcast that covers all things cranes, rigging, and heavy iron. My name is Isaac Smith, and today I'm joined by three experts in the field, Ron Thompson, Gene Greiner, and a special guest from across the pond, if one of you want to introduce him.
Well, I certainly can, and I actually understand Chris Thomas' accent. Sometimes I can't, but Chris I can. Met Chris several years ago. He is he's the CEO of an MGA over in London. He's got a partner named Richard Brown, who's not on the podcast, but he's the chief underwriting officer. We've known Chris because his facility is set up. It's a tailor-made MGA, which means the tougher the risk, better fits the appetite of his MGA called Artis, A-R-T-E-S. Now, Chris, before we get into what you do and how you can help clients and the structure of your MGA, where did the name Artis come from?
That's a really good question. Also, thanks for having me on the show, guys. I have been watching from afar, enviously waiting for my turn. And I'm wondering, I kept saying to Rich, why haven't they asked us on the show yet? So Rich sends his apologies. But the name, I think...
or maybe I hope he doesn't ask us on the show.
Well, yeah. And here's Rich. Yeah. The only problem is he'd come in and, because he's like 6'7" and I'm not 6'7", so we look like some kind of comedy act. But yeah. Anyway, but back to the name. I think most founders who've gone through setting up a business will probably say one of the hardest things to come up with is the name, and for a variety of reasons, but mainly because we live on a planet of God knows how many billion people and God knows how many million companies. And someone somewhere has undoubtedly probably taken the name that you thought of and patented it or trademarked it or done whatever else limited your usage of it. So sometimes you just have to be kind of original. And I think especially with insurance, there's so many people that set up and, we knew what we didn't want. I didn't want a Latin name because it's massively overused in the UK. And I just find it a bit pretentious, really. I also wanted something that meant something to us. So Artis was actually born out of my daughter's initials, so Annabelle Rose Thomas, and the first two letters of our first dog's name, Esme, Artes. And ultimately, we actually use that as a kennel name as well, because we breed this particular breed of dog. But back to the point of it, ultimately, Artes is about, it was set up by myself and three very close friends of mine, and it was about making sure our families were secure. So it seemed fitting that we utilize one of our children's name, and Annabelle, as you know, has had her challenges through life. So, I think she's shown so much resilience that it felt like I suggested to Rich and Maurits, who's the other gentleman who helped us set up, and everyone went, yeah, that's the right name. We've got to go with that. And my wife's also in branding, and she kind of looked at it and went, I can do so much with that name. So, we put it forward, and thankfully no one had thought of it. So here we are, nearly 6 years later.
It's a very unusual name, and it's very catchy, but I'm going to dig into Chris's background a little bit. He's not your regular Joe. Tell us about your affiliation with the Old Blues Association.
Oh, right. So, yeah, funny enough, that's my, the school I went to, the secondary school, high school, you guys would call it, that I went to, is quite a special institution, establishment. It was founded in the 1600s by King Edward I think it was the sixth, and the boy king Henry VIII's son, effectively. And it was established as a school, a charity school, for children who were found on the streets of London. So to this day, it's a school that at least 80% of the children are there on bursaries. It has a foundation, has a load of money stored and that's managed and been looked after over the years. And so it's a school for children who wouldn't have had the opportunities that some more privileged and rich the kids would have had to go in and develop themselves and expand their horizons. So once you leave the school, you're referred to as an old blue. And you also take a charge that once you leave the school, you'll remember the help the school's given you. And, myself personally, my parents couldn't afford to send me to a school of that caliber, or just a run-of-the-mill school of that caliber. So, I've worked closely with the school over the years, and I was chairman of the old Blues Association for a period. But if I think back to, I'm probably jumping ahead a bit here, Ron, but my entrance into the insurance world was funny enough. I sat next to someone at a lunch in my final year at the school when I was 18, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I picked insurance. I think I'd seen Wall Street at the time, and I'd see the Lloyd's building and thought that was quite interesting. And he happened to know Stephen Catlin. So I got a written letter. I got some work experience. Work experience turned into pretty much 16 months in the city in 2001, which was amazing. And I never looked back, really. I did go to university, but that was it. So, the school really has enabled my entrance into insurance. So it's quite an important part of my story, if you will.
Do you have any pictures when you were there?
I know where you're going with
this. A blue jacket and yellow stockings.
Well, I did say the school was quite unique. It was set up in the 1600s, and one of the more unique aspects of the school is it's maintained the same uniform. So I don't have a photo to hand, but I'm sure you do, Ron, or something you could post up. But yes, yellow stockings, breeches to the knee. I just
asked ChatGPT, and they showed a young Chris, 16 years old, with this blue coat and yellow stockings.
I'm sure I can find something somewhere, Ron. I'll dig something out for you. But the funny thing is, it's the reason, a little bit like the uniform in the army, the reason that they have that uniform is it is uniform and it equalizes everyone. So, you don't have someone coming to school, decked out in Gucci versus someone coming to school decked out from the thrift shop. So it does actually have an important role. And also, once you're there, you kind of become quite proud of it. We used to play rugby against certain other schools, and I mean, this is where you see the other side of parents sometimes. They used to call us the paupers and don't let the paupers beat them. And, it was phenomenal. But because you were wearing that uniform, it gave you very much a feeling of belonging and being, and defending
bulletin board material.
Yeah.
Well, and I looked up. I said, what are the pathways to upper learning once you go to Christ Hospital School? I mean, you're talking Cambridge, Oxbridge, and our famous University of Kent. I mean, these are prestigious English institutions with famous alumni, especially University of Kent.
Well, I was basically told by Paul Brandon Catlin to go and get a degree. So by that point, I was a little bit late to the application process. Incidentally, I had actually been accepted to St Andrews when I was at Christ Hospital to read international relations. And I would have been there at the same time as Prince William. Having said that, I very much doubt we would have been rubbing shoulders too much. I wasn't quite of that caliber. Having said that, there were some people who will remain nameless that did target that university to go up there and I'm sure to try and hobnob. But no, University of Kent was, at the time I decided I wanted to read law. I was pretty much told by my parents, if you want us to fund you to university, you're gonna study law. And it's held me in fairly good stead. But University of Kent gave me an unconditional offer. And actually they do have a very well respected law school. It was very critical thinking law school and ties back to London. So it kind of made sense and it wasn't too far away. Kent's quite a nice place. Canterbury, if you've ever been, is quite a wonderful city to live in for a period of time.
It's the apocalypse when you change your emphasis from law to insurance. And one thing about Christ Hospital School being over here, we think, Chris went to a school that probably owned a hospital. But the interpretation of hospital strictly means It's a charitable institution. And I think, Chris, with that background has carried over to right now where you are at Artis. You care about people, family, employees, maybe the underprivileged. Let's just put it that way.
If I look at our own recruitment and how we've begun to build the business, because I still think, although we're established, we're in our infancy of where we want to end up effectively. But I remember being that 18-year-old who wrote to someone who gave me a chance. And so, where we've recruited in our staff school leavers, as in at 16 school leavers. You can't do that anymore in the UK. They've changed the rules. But, we very much take people on the merits and the talent that they demonstrate and show, determination. So we've actively, at times, strayed away from looking for university leavers, for graduates. I'm very much of the opinion that you can kind of teach insurance to everyone. You can't teach street smarts, common sense, and actually something that I'm lacking is really good IT and coding skills. I'm happy to take someone on at a younger age and actually show them the way through insurance and encourage them and fund their professional qualifications in this field, because I think our industry does really have potential for a very fulfilling career. There's so many different areas that you can move into in it. I think as an industry, certainly in the UK, it was looked down upon for a while because everyone just associated it with car insurance and house insurance. No one really grasped the concept that without insurance, we live in a world that won't work if there's not insurance there, So the industry's been very good to me, and I'm trying to share some of that back.
I'm going to read a quote from your website, and you're going to interpret it for me, Chris. We are a made-to-measure tailor of insurance products. We create sector bespoke insurance products. Bespoke is not spoke over here quite often, but I had to look it up. Now I know what it means. Why don't you go ahead and expand on that?
So the whole point of Artes was to basically enable Rich and I to create products where we saw opportunity and a need for them, and where we felt that we could make a difference. For so long, he and I had worked in different companies where the final decisions were being made that didn't really make any logical sense to me, or there always seemed to be a fear or a reticence to innovate and actually take a risk, ironically, bearing in mind we work in insurance, right? That's the whole point. So it was in talking to, I've been very lucky in my career, and I've traveled extensively internationally, and I've been even luckier in that I've been able to build up a relatively sizable network of people that I also regard as friends. And I'm very good at staying in touch with people, and I'm trying to join the dots. So, when we were effectively offered the opportunity to build out the crane products in the US, nothing like it existed in London. No one was doing anything like it. And it was a real challenge because we were going to capacity providers and they were saying, well, we could do this, but we can't do this. We could do the equipment, but we can't do the real and personal property, or we can't do the MTC. But we eventually got it placed. And when we talk about a bespoke product, that is an incredibly complex product that a lot of people would shy away from. A lot of people would just shy away from cranes, let alone chucking in riggers liability, let alone chucking in MTC, APD, Bailey's, installation. I don't want to bore you, but I can go on. We've got nearly 10 sections to a policy. So that really is bespoke. And I think even to this day, when we talk to capacity providers who are new to Artes and you show them this product, this product, just this one, they go, oh, wow, okay, see what you mean. You really are adding value here. And then when you build into that, the strong relationships we have with the distribution, and the fact that we are not a million miles removed away from the policyholder, and that we go to the SCNRA and try and meet people. We're not afraid of meeting our customers. That's the bespoke part. Then you factor in the service levels. We try and turn things around as quickly as possible. We're using IT. We've developed a system now which is incredibly quick to issue policies. We can just press a button. Same with MTAs, which you'll hopefully see the benefit of over the next months. That's just the US. You think about Australia, we went there and we set up a material damage, as you guys would call it, an equipment inland marine product team with liability, which no one was doing locally. So we're always looking for that what's the next advancement of where we are? How can we go and add value somewhere which is actually valuable to the policyholder? So sorry, I'm kind of waffling on a bit, but we see it as we see ourselves a little bit as tailors of insurance, in that someone comes in and says, I need a suit that fits me, not just fits off the peg. And we effectively go and bespoke that product to fit them and fit what they need. So, they put it on and go, yeah, that's right for me. And I'm willing to pay you the premium that I'm willing to pay,
So this is a podcast about crane talk, but we have other listeners, Chris, just besides the crane and rigging sector. Your products will expand over here in the U.S. beyond the inland marine product for crane and rigging.
That was always the plan, Ron. The proof of concept of Artes was the crane and rigging product and the portfolio. And it still remains front and center of everything we do, because it represents the biggest underwriting opportunity. But as I said, we have launched into Australia. We're doing at the moment, we're doing a forestry product with a liability component. And we've just expanded that into broader plant and equipment, so we can look at anything now. In terms of the US, it is very much our intention to look to see what's next. Yes, we write cranes, heavy haul transportation. We can look at concrete pumpers, but we'd love to consider more specialist inland marine products. We have experience in forestry. That might be something that we would be very interested in. But really, before any of that happens, we need the right partner or partners. That's what we're looking for, is people who have books of business, that have data, even if, it's been distressed, we don't mind that, but who have a strategy and who we can partner with. We can add value to them. They can add value to us. We create that nice equilibrium, which then works for all of us. We lock each other into a good, healthy, strategic relationship, and we can move forward. So, yes, we're looking for opportunities all the time. We're just we've just taken on, he's going to be joining us in a few months. We've got a gentleman coming to set up a construction division for us. So that will start in the UK, and then we'll look further afield. So yeah, we are looking to expand and looking to offer more.
Your philosophy, Chris, you kind of underwrite your partners. You kind of underwrite your distributors, and you're looking for partnerships that really know that particular industry. And that's impressive, because Gene and myself have been doing this quite a while. And when we go out and look at selective risk, we're looking for risk that can be our partners, not one just to get insurance pricing. And when we go out there, I feel like we're more educating our clientele on how to mitigate loss, how to loss control, reduce losses. We even go further and we talk about B30 regulations, and we talk about what's happening in our legislature, that what can laws be passed to actively reduce your exposure to mostly plaintiff counsel. But I liked and I read where you're very selective on who you pick and work with.
Absolutely. I mean, that really is the cornerstone and the value add that we represent to our capacity providers. So again, it's a symbiotic relationship all the way through this. We can't do it without, obviously, the policyholders. We certainly can't do it without specialist brokers such as yourselves and others who understand all the aforementioned aspects of a risk. Equally, we're trying to add value back down to the client by educating them with your help about risk transfer, just the work tickets, making sure that the wordings are being reviewed and changed as the laws change, or we see some of these awards going out, and making sure that everyone's protected through subrogation, where we have risk transfer, and not just leaving that as so many others do. They just let it go. Let's just pay it and gone. It just gives the wrong message. And ultimately, so then when we go and talk to the capacity provider about cranes, And you can generally see as soon as you walk in and say cranes, they shudder because they think, oh God.
So
not
Chris, let
cranes.
me stop you there. Is there a hangover in the Lloyd's marketplace about U.S. crane profitability going back to the 80s and 90s and 2000s?
A little bit. Sorry, Ron. I don't think it's just cranes. I think there's a suspicion about US business. And the reason there is a suspicion is because Lloyd's are only used to seeing US business really on a wholesale basis now. And the interpretation of that is we're just seeing the crap that the local market doesn't want to write or the admitted market doesn't want to write. So you have to break down that barrier. And you do so by all of the aspects that we've just mentioned and demonstrating that everyone in the chain knows what they're doing and everyone in the chain adds value. So you're actually getting to see accounts that you wouldn't see. And that is the reality is, when we show the capacity providers the data we have, we know that they wouldn't have seen 90% of those risks. There will be no record of those risks anywhere near them. And that's what perks their interest.
Yeah, I started in this business back in the early 90s, and we were dealing with London. I mean, we had a line slip with 10 different syndicates filling up that 100%. And then we'd have a syndicate go bankrupt or pulled out. And then we had 85% filled. And this was, you come out of a really tough 80s market. And I remember, I won't name names, but we had a lead underwriter over there that would entertain, and he was a kingpin, man. And he signed off on that crane and rigging book from about 92 to about 96 or 97. And it was not profitable because the wrong things were being done as far as evaluating risk. And a lot of things that the London market underwrote, and this is primarily third-party GL, auto, and umbrella, was not priced adequately. And it took a while to clean it up. And I don't know if that hangover, it sounds like it's still there.
Back then, that was the only option. There really wasn't a domestic option, right?
Yeah, it was coming out of a really tough 80s market, Chris. And I remember you could get a quote for a $250,000 liability limit with a $250 SIR.
Brilliant.
Yeah, this is on the third party side. So how did you guys, you're in the Australian logging market, and that's a completely different litigation environment than U.S. What made you decide to come over here?
Contacts. It was, someone called me up one day and he said, hey, look, I know you've been writing plant and equipment for the last 10 years. There's a gentleman that actually I'd worked with much earlier in my career. And he knew MBIS, and he introduced me to the folks around there, and we got talking. And that's really where we started to structure out the product. And we've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But, the reality is, without that phone call, Artes may not be here today, because that opportunity represented critical mass to get us off the ground and to get us trading, which then, allowed us to go and find a partner in Australia for the forestry, because that's the other thing I should mention. We don't currently write open market business to any broker. We have, in the US, we used to have, as one point of entry. That's changed now. We have a small select panel of distribution who we know and trust over the years, and that's working well for us. But in Australia, we only have 2 brokers we use at the moment in the logging. With the CPE, again, it's going to be a handful, because we look for people that understand the product. I'm not just looking for, I'm not here for market share. I'm here to underwrite the best in class and to pay the fortuitous losses when they happen on those risks, because they're not always going to have great years. It doesn't run like that. You are going to have losses. And I think, just coming back again to the hangover, Ron, in London, I think the reality is a lot of people wade into the crane and rigging space seeing a quick buck, and then they get tagged because they get hit with a big loss, and we're talking, as you guys well know, cranes now, they're only going one way in terms of value because they're technically advancing so quickly, and people don't like that. They like the premium when it's coming in. They don't like it when one of them goes over and they're stuck with a $5 million loss, and suddenly they go, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. That's a big shock loss exposure. I think for us, we knew, we went into this eyes wide open, and we make sure that the capacity providers understand that this is, for us, if you're on board with us, you got to stay in for 5 years, and that's when you'll see the profitable returns. You dip in 1 year in, 1 year out, it's not going to work. You have to be courageous in this space. There's a gentleman that you guys interviewed not long ago who, is a good friend of mine. I won't say the full quote, but he always says the same for the week, and it's very true. It's very true.
You're one phone call away. And I've always said, when you get a phone call on a Saturday evening from a client, it's not, how's the kids? How's the wife doing, Ron? How's the weather? It's something that happened, and you got to react quick. And one thing, I'm familiar with Artis's product on the inland marine side. For people that don't know inland marine, that's the coverage that covers all the physical loss to these cranes. And we also include any transportation exposure. And there may be warehouse exposure where our crane accounts will warehouse transformers or chillers from their clientele. And you wrap all that in one policy. But Chris he's pretty inventive on creating additional coverage forms, enhancing coverage forms that you don't find in the marketplace. And I won't get too specific, Chris, but we talked about this in, I think, Arizona. A couple of key factors that you guys are willing to do, if it makes sense, is to add loss of use on cargo and the rigger's liability while it's on the inland marine side. So not to get too deep in the woods on that, but that's creative, and that's a huge selling point. We don't ever want any claims, but if you do, we have that safety net sitting there.
Absolutely.
I thought that was really creative.
Well, thank you. And I think, look, don't get me wrong, that less so the LOU, but the on-hook occasionally keeps me awake at night, and when we have been tagged on that on a large account a few years ago. But again, I think, and this may sound a bit silly, I never trust the underwriters to go, I never have losses, right? I actually want to hear from people that have had losses, because the only way you learn in life is by having these losses, and that doesn't mean that I particularly enjoyed a kind of 12-month period where it felt like we were having a lot of losses. I didn't, but I sure learned a huge amount during that time. Fast forward 3 years, we can sit here and we can consider those coverages, because I kind of know what it looks like when it goes wrong. And I know what I'm looking for in the policyholders that I'm willing to offer those coverages to. I think the challenge we kind of have at the moment is because the casualty space is such a basket case right now, led off by these nuclear verdicts. And for a long time, the casualty component of the MBIS book picked up the rigger's liability, the on-hook liability. There is now that gap, and it's needed to be covered. And it's hard enough for you guys to get a vanilla casualty placement done, let alone ask them to then start doing on hook. Where there's a need, we'll try and move into that space and match it. But I'm very sensitive to it becoming endemic on every risk, which isn't kind of where I want to be. I still want to say this is something we can do, but it's not something we're just throwing in. And that's always the danger when you are innovating, but that's on us. And again, that's on us when we're selecting our partners, being able to have an honest conversation around that and knowing we're not going to be pushed for it. But it's a lovely tool to have in the toolkit, because we aren't admitted paper. We're a non-admitted surplus lines carrier, which brings its own challenges. We haven't got the line size that some of our admitted competitors can do. I can't put down 100 million. limit. It's just that's just the way it goes. So we I like to compare ourselves. There's a place called Goodwood in the UK, which is very famous for horse racing, but also for motor racing. And every year there's a thing called the Goodwood Revival, which is full of classic cars. And there's one particular race where there's a great big Ford Galaxy, an old 1960s Ford Galaxy, and a 1960s Mini, and they go at it, right? And the Mini has not got the whopping great V8 that this Galaxy has, so it takes it on the straights. But in the corners, the Mini can keep up and it can zip around. We're kind of that Mini, we're having to use everything in our arsenal to make ourselves a preferred option. And that's okay. I don't mind doing that. But you can't be lazy. You've got to consistently be innovating, considering, reviewing, talking to people. As you know, Ron, I traveled extensively in the US. That's the bit that matters. Go and be seen and listen to people.
Well, it's refreshing because the third party liability cover domestically is tired. It's spent. It needs fresh blood. We've been saying this forever. Lots of no's behind a lot of corners. Everything is diminishing. Everything is reducing. The capacity is not moving in the right direction. It's getting smaller. And so with the inland marine cover, which is, more the policy that the insureds can touch and feel and understand because it's the equipment in their yard behind their office, when that's down after a claim and they're driving into the yard every morning, and they're looking at that equipment going, gosh, dang it, I wish, we had a better cover on that, or I wish, the carrier were more adaptive to what we need because I'm looking at this thing sitting in the yard. It's more of it's a first party cover, obviously, but to be able to say, hey, we've thought about it, we've seen the claims, we know there's some exposures out there, we're willing to be creative, on a case by case basis when needed to help, the right partner. That's a different message than what we've been hearing in other lines of coverage right now here domestically in the U.S. So, I mean, it's nice to hear that, and it's not a message that's common right now. So
I'm going to use your mind, Chris, on adding the rigors to the inland marine form. We've been successful recently of explaining to the litigation claims team about the responsibilities on a job site. And when there's a rigging loss, we go and check the multi-parties involved. And we're checking boxes where we weren't the lift director. We may not have rigged it. We're certainly not the supervisor of the project. And we didn't do the flagging or signaling. So we're finding out that the guy sitting in the cab of the crane may have small exposure to a rigging loss. And so when we see a rigging loss, we examine what all parties are at on a job site and who may have fingerprints and the responsibilities outlined by OSHA regulations to say you're responsible for this and you're responsible for that. And the crane operator sitting in the cab is always blamed 100% of the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we go in and dissect responsibilities and say, litigation claims team, let's go after this party and that party. And we've been successful as recently of getting these claims pushed to other parties.
And that's exactly what should be going on. And I think this is why I get a little frustrated where I use a term I use, naive capacity. That doesn't mean anything to do with their rating. It just means someone who comes in, decides they're going to write the class, and then when the claims start coming in, rather than take the approach that you've taken, Ron, it's just get it paid. Just pay it off. It sends exactly the wrong message. It's not just the wrong message from the perspective that people just think we pay claims at the drop of the hat. For the insured, the policyholder, our policyholder, they might be sitting there going, I don't want that claim sitting on my loss history. I haven't done anything wrong here. You're paying this off because you don't want to go to court, you don't want to fight this, but that tarnishes my reputation. That's the reality at the end of the day. So, yeah, great. The claim gets paid out quickly, fine. But there are other professional ramifications off of the back of that, let alone setting a precedent for the insurance well being a bit of a pushover, which I think we have got. Unfortunately, collectively, we've kind of moved into that space because everyone's so terrified of getting caught up in a nuclear verdict in one of the courts,
We're going to do a plug. Gene and myself have an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. the first week in March to speak with reps, senators and House representatives, coordination with the Texas Trucking Association. But they got to hear our voice. They got to hear our voice in Washington to say, look, something's got to change. Small businesses cannot afford insurance, especially on the trucking where rubber meets the road, because of the runaway plaintiff lawyer system, bumper damages, and we see a $2.5 million mediation settlement. And it's got stuff like that has got to be addressed. And that's on the third party side, Chris. And on the inland marine side, the first party coverage, even if our crane upsets, because of an overload or soil conditions, we go, wait, who gave us the weights? Who's responsible for checking the soil stability?
Absolutely.
It sure isn't the crane company. And so being aggressive on pursuing subrogation and recovery is huge. And I think it's what we bring just being in this business to protect our programs. It's so important. We don't want a 1 and 2 year program. We want a long-term program.
Absolutely. I think just building on that as well, I mean, something that we looked at in the past was also just, I've always said that the claims department, although ours says we don't handle claims, there's normally whoever our capacity is will have a delegated claims authority agreement with either, at one point it was, as I say, MBIS, or we find a third-party claims manager to undertake that. The speed at which a claim is processed, investigated, and paid is paramount. And I think we've all seen a very lackadaisical approach in years gone by to how quickly these claims are getting settled. And all that's happening is the meter's running and money's being thrown at it, which doesn't need to happen. We had to say to various parties, you've got to change your approach here. If there's been a fire or overturn, reserve the claim as a total loss, right? And get it paid quickly, right? Because ultimately, the policyholder is not enjoying sitting there whilst you're taking a long, long time to work out what you want to do with this. They're a machine down, especially if it's a larger machine, that's costing them significant amounts of money. It works in everyone's favor to be efficient, quick, and clear in getting these claims settled. Pay out the fortuitous losses. And by all means, if there are mitigating circumstances, pay out and then subrogate. That's what's so important. I know you feel very strongly about that, Ron, and Eugene. We share that feeling.
The subrogation recovery from other parties has been very slow to materialize, Chris. We go to carriers, insurance companies, and say, this is a very subrogatable claim. And their comments is, well, Ron, we're going to have to hire lawyers, pay them, and we only get maybe 50 cents back on the dollar. And that's been the attitude on subrogation. We're going, you got to have a really aggressive subro team. Our clients get subrogation letters all day long.
Yeah.
Reciprocate. Send some out on behalf of our clientele.
Absolutely.
We're going to get to a little bit about what does Chris Thomas do when you're not running an MGA over in London and traveling the 48 states over here. Man, what do you do for like part-time? What do you do in your spare time, man?
I've got 3 daughters under the age of 10, so that's quite a big part of my life. By the way, you're going to get, if you ask my wife this, you'll get a very different answer than the one I'm going to give you. Another reason I feel quite privileged, especially with the businesses, I probably see more of my kids now than I ever saw as an employee an MGA or a syndicate or anything else. I know the world's changed in certainly in the UK and how we work. It's slightly different in the US because you've always been fairly used to remote working because you can't all work necessarily in one location if you're a national insurance company. But I see as much of my kids as I can. In terms of what the things I enjoy doing, I've always loved driving. I've always loved cars. You can probably see behind me, there's cars all over the place. I get a lot of pleasure from just going out on a drive. Equally, we've got two lovely dogs. I walk them every morning. I take the kids to school. I walk the dogs. I see that as they don't see it as a selfish pursuit because they just love going out and walking. I find it a bit selfish because it's just time on my own. They just kind of run around beside me and I use that time to clear my head and plan my day. This is where my wife would answer differently. I've kind of had to have a word with myself last year around you're not getting any younger. You probably need to do some exercise and sort yourself out. And so I've taken up swimming again. We're kind of lucky we've got a hydro pool in the back garden. And again, I find that actually incredibly fulfilling. Just getting in the pool for half an hour and doing a swim. And I've even, whisper it quietly, I've started lifting a few weights here and there as well. So it's obviously a midlife crisis, Ron. But
we will not recognize you when you come over here in 2 weeks.
I mean, I haven't lost that much weight.
So I did a little deep diving on Chris, and he loves diving and driving. And I said, what is it with the British that loves cars? Rowan Atkinson, he's a big car guy. J.K. of Jamiroquai, one of my favorite bands, he's a car nut. You got Jeremy Clarkson. And Chris Rea, who just passed away, one of my favorite all-time artists, was big into cars and race cars. Chris, what's going on over there?
I'll be honest with you. I think because of the communities around. I mean, don't get me wrong. You guys will have the same in the US, but I think cars almost act as a social leveler. And that might sound stupid because, some people might only be able to afford certain cars. But actually, what you tend to find is if you go to, like I said, I mentioned Goodwood earlier, or there's a multitude of car meets you can go to. There's local groups that just get together and go for a drive. Suddenly, all of the, any kind of social hierarchy falls away because it's a common interest. And people are just passionate about these vehicles. I mean, I beyond the fact that as long as I can remember back to when I was a child, I've just loved cars. Like whether it's the noise of them or the smell of them or anything to do with them. Even it's amazing. Like even what most people say crap cars, I kind of take an interest in, and it's just something I have this weird ability to retain quite an amount of useless information about cars. But I think, like I say, just coming back to it, I think when you get lots of people together, it's a social leveler, and there's a common interest and a common goal and a respect, which sadly is lacking from so many other areas of society these days. It's an odd one.
We ought to see if they're doing cars in Coverica while he's here. You have it on your hat. We have a car show here at our office. There's a lot of enthusiasts here that work at Coverica, and
love it.
We with Ron and I handling a lot of the heavy construction mobile equipment. There's a couple of groups here at Coverica that handle a lot of the more rare and neat, European cars and that type of stuff, insuring them. And so they invite them to our parking lot and they put a fence up and they have a car show like once every month or two. So we ought to see if there's one here.
So we're going to your other hobby you like. So my daughter was in Sydney, Australia, doing a student exchange during college.
Yep.
And she traveled to Bali, Indonesia. Just a holiday. Australians go to Indonesia. And over there, she met a gentleman from the Newcastle, and he was over there diving. Apparently, Jakarta and going up northwest along that Indonesian island chain, it's the best diving places in the world. And he's a big diver. He learned to dive in the North Sea. And so it's interesting. And he's heading back over there, Chris, for a 2-week sabbatical to find those big waves coming in, man. And that's pretty cool. And so I'm saying with my son-in-law, cars and diving, and I read his bio on cars and diving. I said, well, what's going on with cars and diving in the UK?
Well, you know, two observations there. If someone's learned to dive in the North Sea, anywhere in the world will be better because the North Sea is frankly. And I haven't even dived in the North Sea, but that's what I call proper diving. I have worked out where this comes from, the diving and the castings, and I think I'm going to lay the blame firmly at my granddad. And when I was probably about 4 or 5, staying in this house because we're in the same house that we've owned since 1966, which is amazing.
Oh, wow.
But I remember watching Live and Let Die, the Bond movie, and there were 2 things in that movie that I was particularly impressed with. And the first one was the cars, because there were some pretty cool car chases. So there you go. That's one of those bits ticked. And the second thing was the sharks at the end of it, which I was very, very interested in. And I think that's really where my interest in diving started, was wanting to go and see sharks. And that maintains. I just don't dive as much now because 3 kids under 10. So, you know, but it's something that if I ever go to Australia and I've got a bit of spare time, I'll chuck the snorkel mask on and get in the sea. The sea's a place that I've always found. I have a healthy respect for it, but it's a place I enjoy being in. I can't just lie on the beach. I'd rather just be in the sea, frankly.
Yeah, my son-in-law moved to New Smyrna Beach, Daytona Beach. New Smyrna Beach is known for the shark bite capital of the U.S. And I said, dude, you ever seen bull sharks, tiger sharks? Oh, yeah. I'm out there on the side. I see them. They're over there. I go, well? He goes, no, not going to bother me. So it's pretty cool. So, yeah, we're going to close it down. It's been an awesome interview, Chris. And one thing that we were very impressed about is you care about people and you care about doing the right thing. A lot of times we see brokers and MGAs maybe look at just the profitability part and not the human aspect. And that's one thing that Gene and myself talked about you. We're really impressed with you and Richard. Richard's a funny guy. I guess we'll see him in a couple of weeks. We always kind of close about funny stuff. Gene, what have you been up to the last month and a half?
Goodness. Well,
you want to talk about Max Greiner?
Do I need to get a popcorn?
Yeah.
Should I get some popcorn?
No. I've been talking about that truck I've been restoring in my garage, and we're almost to first start. So we hopefully can turn the new motor over soon. Speaking of cars. Brilliant. I'm restoring an old pickup. But actually what's funny is what Ron's talking about is there is a family member of mine. I didn't know him that well. But one of our customers down in San Antonio, he erected this giant cross on I-10 west of San Antonio.
77 feet, 7 inches.
Yeah, it's huge.
Wow.
And he lifted the cross pro bono for the group that had the cross built. And the guy that leads that group is my distant great uncle, and our last names are spelled the same way, right? And so our customer called Ron and was like, hey, that Max Greiner spells his name the same way as Gene spells his name. Do they know each other? Oh, yeah, they are. They're in the same family. So anyway, Max said, well, let's go down there and see that site. So we drove down there and saw all the grounds and, the giant cross. And, and they just had the catastrophe with the flood in Central Texas. And so they are adding memorials there at the cross for all of the young ones and all the people that perished in that flood. And so that was very moving to see that. So that was right there before the holidays. So that was a really cool trip that we went on.
It's a 26-acre site standing up on a hill, and Kerrville's about an hour northwest of San Antonio. And you start seeing this cross miles out on the freeway.
Wow.
And when you go up there, it's a huge cross. And during COVID, people across the world came to get blessed with holy dust standing underneath that cross.
Wow.
And Max Greiner is a world-renowned artist of doing life-size biblical structures. And it was pretty weird because here's a guy that, I've seen the cross, didn't know anything about it, and Gene's related to the guy.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, met him a couple of times at family weddings and this and that. But It was our customer that was like, "Hey, we need to go down there and see that spot." I'd never been. I'd not been to the location. It was really cool.
It was a great time.
Really
and
cool. It was good
our crane client erected that cross in 2010. It was 125,000 pounds was the weight of that cross.
Yep.
And and Max Greiner was just starting that whole architectural mountaintop there, and didn't have any money, so our crane guy just donated his crane service.
Incredible.
Man, it's for a great cause. And there was some opposition, Chris. There was some opposition in Kerrville because there was quite a few people against putting a big, huge Christian cross there on a hill coming into their city.
Really?
They didn't want it. So, that was pretty cool. I always end up kind of a movie review. I saw the latest Leonardo DiCaprio film.
Yeah.
And
What was that?
it's called One Battle After Another. And it's a black comedy. It's way out there. My prediction, it'll get 8 to 9 Academy nominations. And it's for Best Picture, Best Director, Caprio, Best Actor. Sean Penn makes a comeback.
Yeah,
he's going to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. Benicio del Toro.
Oh, really?
He runs away with it.
So
Runs away with that movie, doesn't he?
stole it. Paul Thomas Anderson is a director. He did Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood,
Okay.
Daniel Day-Lewis, The Master,
Yep.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, Phantom Thread, one of my favorite films of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis. So he's going to get nominated. We'll see how this performs at the Academy Awards, but I would recommend it, not for everybody.
Yeah.
There's some political slant to it, not for everybody. But as far as the characters, it was A+. So that's my recommendation on the movie.
That is
Man,
good.
Chris, I can't wait to see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to it.
Hopefully we can do a lot of business together, man.
Just quickly on that point of the cross, right? I think it's the thing that separates us from the beasts is that we have not only the propensity for altruism, so going out of our way to help someone where it doesn't favor us, but also man's ability to create something just for the sake of creating it. And I have so much respect for people that set themselves a challenge or whatever you want to call it, their life's work, right? To create something that may not mean anything to anyone else, but they create. I think that is the mark of someone that understands why you're here, because you can create. And being able to do that is, we all have the ability to do that. Not everyone does it. And it is leaving your mark before you shuffle off this mortal coil. It's a big thing.
Also, again, one last shout out to you. I see that you're very active with Haven House.
Yes.
This is a children's hospice. And just the character, Chris, of what you're doing, you're devoting your time, you're giving back a lot. And it kind of tells us about your upbringing. And we appreciate that, man. So just want to give you a shout out for that.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Look, I've had a blast. It's been great. Honestly, I could go on for hours, but I think we all need to go for our tea, right?
We'll do podcast part 2.
Hey,
Chris, before we go, tell us the best way to get a hold of you if anyone has any questions or wants to follow what you're doing.
yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, LinkedIn is the obvious one. I'm on there. Artist website. But really, if you want to contact us from a business perspective, go through the gentleman sitting here, and they know how best to get hold of us, or come and find me at the SCNRA. But LinkedIn's the best one. We're at the conference, the SCNRA, every year. But yeah, any of those mediums, easiest way to get hold of me.
Well, thank you for listening, and be sure that you subscribe and leave the show a 5-star review. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us following the links in the show notes below, and we will see you next time.